Hello, friends, and welcome to another video lesson from DBOS Talks. If you haven't subscribed yet, please subscribe and click the bell so that you can be notified of new uploads. This video is in the playlist called Linux Tutorial, and here we'll be learning about the CP command which is the Linux copy command. Okay, so copy is a command used to, I'll just paste it here. Is a command used to copy directories and or files, okay, depending on your need, your requirement. Okay, let me just give you the syntax of this one. Syntax is format. I believe the more you watch the videos, you will keep on hearing the word syntax, and syntax is the format, especially of a command, how it's being written. Is like in a language that you speak, in any kind of language, there would be grammars, which are rules by which the language can be used and be understood. And the same applies for a programming language, even Linux, which is technically it's an OS with its own scripting language. So the same thing applies. You need syntaxes for the interpreter to understand it correctly. Okay, so this is the syntax for the copy command, which is the CP command. So CP, which is the command itself, followed by options. Of course, options by, as the name suggests, it's optional. Okay, you can skip it for now as you begin to learn the language. You don't confuse yourself and overwhelm yourself with so many things. Okay, let's keep it simple. CP is the command, options are optional. And then after that, the must is R, the source file and the destination file. Later on, once you get a grasp of this, then you can apply that concept and understanding into doing a copy of directories. Okay, so here, just to keep it simple, we will be copying files, all right? But the same concept can be applied later on once you're at work to copying directories, which are also known as folders. Okay, so let's start with, let me just clear the screen. Let me start with this use case. Copying a file to the same directory. So if this is your first time in this channel and in this playlist, I do suggest you go to the very beginning of this playlist, Linux tutorial, so that you can have a good foundation, get the basics right, so that when I throw down here terminologies pertaining to Linux, especially to the topic we are talking about, then you will not be lost because you will know when I say PWD what it is for, the ls command what it is for. If I do a who am I, you know what it is for. All right, so let's do that. Otherwise, if you're good, if you have some basic knowledge of Linux, or you have watch my video from the very beginning of this playlist, then you can proceed with this one. Okay. So first, let's do a PWD, which is used to print the current working directory to know where we're at in the directory tree of Linux. So we are at this location called /home/dbos/exer, which I just named it as such, which means exercise or exercises. All right. And then I would like to use the copy command. But before that, if you want to do a copy command, make sure the object that you want to copy is actually there. So I will do a list long, which is something we have taken up in a previous video. So when I do a list long, it contains the directory where we're at, which is this one, excerpt folder, contains one text file called file_1.txt. Remember, in Linux, do not ever forget that things, objects, directories, files, and most commands, options, most of them, all of them perhaps, are case sensitive. Okay, so same with file names. When we have a file name like this, stick to that. When you do a list and then you go the F instead of an uppercase, you use a lowercase, then for sure you will not find it. Okay, so we did a list long in this location, and then it returned to me. It's telling me that there's a file called file_1.txt, which is a text file. And I want to use that for the purpose of doing a copy. Okay, let's just clean up. I'll clear the screen and I'll begin with, we already did a PWD, you know that. We're here. And now I'm gonna do a copy. So Um, Give me a sec. I forgot if I already pasted here the syntax. Okay, I'll just paste the syntax again. CD options, source, and the destination. Okay, so bear that. I'll just keep that there in the screen while I paste the actual command. Okay, so CP, of course, CP is CP. Options, I skipped it for this so that you will not be overwhelmed. The source file is this one called file underscore one.txt, and the destination file is the file underscore two.txt. What we mean by source and destination is just simple. So since we're doing a copy, of course, you know what copy means. It's an English word. We are reproducing that file. So what's existing is file underscore one.txt, and we're telling Linux to create a copy of that, an exact replica, and call it file underscore two.txt. That's the meaning of source and destination. Okay, so this is the one that we have in hand, and we want Linux to create a copy of that and call it this, okay, which is file underscore two.txt. But my scenario for this one is this. I've already erased it. The scenario for this, or the use case for this one, is this: copying a file to the same directory, which is as shown by the pwd command. We're actually at this location, home slash dbo slash extra. Okay, so let me just execute this. So you would think that nothing happened, but in fact, silence means okay in Linux. So it should have already made or created a copy of this file underscore one.txt and called it file underscore two.txt. We can easily verify that using a list long, which you have learned in a previous video. So true enough, we can see two files that are not identical based on file name. That's obvious because I made a copy of the original, which is the source, is the destination file. All right, and you can see they're not of the same timestamp. They have the same date, December 6th, but the timestamp is different. 2218, that's 10:18 p.m. and the other one is 10:47 p.m. Definitely not the same, okay? So that is the effect of doing the copy file, which is the CP. It's written as CP, but it's doing a copy, okay? So again, the use case here is copying a file to the same directory, okay? So because if I do a PWD, we are at this location, and both these files, file one and file 2 are in this location. How do I know? Because I did a list long without specifying a path, a location. So when we do a list long without specifying a path, we are making Linux do a listing at the current directory, which is in this case right now is this one. Okay. So that's the first scenario. Now, if you want to do some verification of the copy that was made, then you can do that. We can learn now one command used for viewing text files, which is cat, which is, it's a long story, but it's short for concatenate. But for now, just take note that cat is a Linux command used for viewing small files. All right, so small files, what's the definition of this? Maybe uh, it's not more than one page. That's the simplistic definition of a small file. And when you do a cat of a small file, it will just show everything in one go, and you will not have the option of doing some page down, page up. Why? Because the assumption of Linux is it's already a small file. So you can see everything in one view, in one glance. Okay, so if I do a cat of this, so this is the new file, remember, this was file one was the source, and the copied one was called file two, or file underscore two. Okay, so I just want to view. Okay, let me just clear it. So cat file one is this, and then I will cat the second one, file two is this. So later on you can I can show you in some other video the diff command, but right now don't just I don't want to throw everything in one video and confuse you. So I'm just showing you that this is the effect of the copy command, which is supposed to reproduce a file and also a directory. In this case, we're copying a text file, and you can see that they're identical. And that's with the use of a command that maybe you're just seeing for the first time, cat, which is used for viewing smaller or relatively small text files. Okay, so that's the copying. This scenario here is copying a file to the same directory. Okay. Now let me just give you a scenario of what you shouldn't do. Okay, if you remember the syntax of the copy command, CP command, it's CP options, which are of course optional, and then you have the source file and or directory, and then after that is the destination, meaning the file name of the existing object, and then after that is the file name of the object that you want to get created. Okay, so in this case, you may not see anything wrong if you are not so observant, but if you will look closely at the second file name, it actually is exactly the same as the first file name. So file underscore one txt, and the second file name, I intentionally use the same file name to trigger an error so that you can be reminded and be aware to avoid this mistake. Okay, so again, copy file underscore one, in the next file, I intentionally use the same file name. Okay, so if I execute this, it will tell you this one. File name and file name are the same file. So it's a no-no, don't do this because you're doing a copy. Linux will, of course, it's an OS, it should be making sense, and it doesn't make sense for you to make a copy of something and call it the same, unless it is in another location, like in another directory. Okay, so this is not allowed. Okay, with that out of the way, I will proceed with the next use case. Okay. So the next use case is copying a file to a different directory using absolute path. Okay, take note. Copying a file to a different directory or folder, but using absolute path. And this absolute path thingy over here is something I've taken up in a previous video in this playlist. So I hope if you do not know this, I suggest you really go that even to the very beginning of this playlist so you're not lost. Okay, so absolute path is the keyword here, or key phrase. So let's look at the command cp file underscore one txt, which is the source file, and then home slash dbos file one da, 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 da. So after that, cp is the source file, and after that the whole bunch of text with no spaces in it corresponds to the destination file. Okay, so but as my use case suggests, I am copying this file to a different directory, which is why we have a path here. And not only that, I'm using absolute path. If you remember my video previously, absolute path is a path that begins at the root directory, which is a slash, okay, forward slash. So as if nothing happened, but something really happened in the background, which is the file called file1.txt has been copied to this location with this file name. And we can verify that using absolute path also, okay? So you can copy this because I use absolute path here. I will also use absolute path here. So you can see, although not all the time you'll be using this, but I'm just showing you so you can get the hang of it, you can get comfortable and familiar with the tools that you have at your fingertips, okay? So I'm doing a list long, a detailed listing, just to verify that the copy has been successful in this command execution over here, okay? So it is there. The file has been copied with to a different location, which is slash home slash dbos, which is my home directory. And then it is also bearing the file name which I specified. Okay, so you can see the timestamp is correct because if I do a date command here, The time is 22:55. Here is 22:54. It's only off by a few seconds, okay, between this and this. All right, so we can be sure this is a newly created file, and it's an effect of the execution of this copy command over here using absolute path. Okay, absolute path. Absolute path is a path which starts at the root directory. Okay. Okay, let me just go to the next scenario or use case. So copying a file to a different directory, but this time using relative path. Okay. Also, for this one, relative path is a topic I've taken up in a previous video. So if you missed that, I do suggest you go to that. But in fact, if you haven't watched from the very beginning, I do suggest you start from the very beginning of this playlist called Linux Tutorial. So you really can get a clear view of what's happening, terminologies, syntaxes, etc., etc. Okay, so copying a file to a different directory using relative path. Here goes the command. So copy, which is cp, this is the source file, file1 underscore one.txt, and then the next bunch of text is corresponding to the destination file, which is also consisting of the path, which is using a relative path syntax over there, as well as the file name itself, okay? So if I execute this, again, you would think that nothing happened, but something really did happen in the background. And before we get to that, okay, anyway, I can verify that the copying really happened. But before that, let me just break down for you this command over here, which is quite a mouthful for those who are not familiar with Linux, okay, or just beginning to learn it. So you remember the simple syntax for copy command, cp, the options which are optional, and then you have the source file or directory, and then the destination file or directory, okay? So we have the cp here, and then here's the source file, file underscore one.txt. I did not mention a path. That means I'm referring to a file of this file name located at the current working directory. That's the meaning of that. And then this is the destination. But if you will look at it, it seems odd for you. But if you go and you backtrack and go to my previous videos, you would realize that I touched on this topic, which is relative path. So the double dot here means one directory up in the directory tree of Linux. Okay, so I'm telling Linux, copy this file to this location, one folder up. Move there, not move. Go to that directory one level up and then copy this file to that location and call it this. That's the meaning of that. Okay, so that has been executed successfully, but I can help you verify that using also relative path. So if we look at this command, it's also not that long, but if you're not familiar, you're just getting warmed up with Linux commands and such, I can also walk you through this command. So we have the list command here, which is the ls command is a list command used for listing directories and or files in the Linux file system. The -l is an option, of course, optional. It will give you a detailed listing of directories and or files. Okay, if I will not specify a folder path here, then Linux will look at the current directory. But in this case, I'm providing or specifying a relative path, which is denoted by the double dot. Okay, so I'm telling Linux, do a detailed listing of objects, that means dirs and files, one level up with this pattern, asterisk.txt, which is a wildcard character. So I'm saying, do a detailed listing of all objects, all text files, one directory up. And when I do that, you can see now that there are two text files in that location, and both of them I have created minutes apart, only as we went through this video. Okay, so In this short video, I don't want to make it too long and complicated. We have learned about the copy command, which is CP, and we've learned about the syntax of using the CP command. Later on in subsequent videos, we can talk about the options of the copy command, the most frequently used ones, because there could be, again, lots of them. And then we looked at a couple of scenarios here. One is copying a file to the same directory, and then I also throw in there scenario where the one that we should be avoiding, which is using the same file name on both the source and destination, which would potentially throw an error at you. And then we moved on to the scenario or use case of copying a file to a different directory, and I broke that into two scenarios uh, under that, which is using absolute path and using relative path. Okay. Thank you for watching and listening. If you haven't subscribed yet, please subscribe and click the bell. And I'll be seeing you in the next video.